Is a river alive? Now that's a question. It's a question that throws up so many ifs, buts, and maybes, but perhaps most importantly, if not, why not? Rivers help save me, and I truly believe they are our lifeblood, our circulation, our healers. But they also need saving now in these troubled times of extraction, industrialization, and pollution. Welcome back to the Last Salmon Podcast, Season 2, with me, Jim Murray. Over the next 12 episodes, I will be exploring and discussing the plight of the wild salmon, from the chalk stream salmon to the Scottish, the Baltic salmon to the Norwegian, the Pacific salmon to the eastern seaboard of America, all with one goal in mind: to find out what is happening and why, and most importantly, what we can all do to help save this iconic and endangered species. To kick off Season 2, we're taking the big picture view when it comes to rivers, and we're asking, shouldn't the rights of nature be respected in our laws and constitutions? If a limited company can have legal rights, why can't our rivers? Without our rivers, without due care, without oversight, well, we all know what can happen and is happening in terms of water quality and how that is affecting us all, not least of all, the wild salmon. And so to help with some of these existential questions, celebrated nature writer Robert Macfarlane joins me to discuss how he set out on journeys around the globe, from Ecuador to India and Canada, and finally to his own home waters in Cambridge, to ask, is a river alive?
In 2008, Ecuador became the first country to place 4 articles in its constitution, its governing principles, recognizing the rights of nature. So the first of those recognizes the right of nature, rivers, forests, mountains, to exist, to flourish, and to persist. The last of those makes the state the guarantor of those rights. And it allows any citizen to bring a case on behalf of nature, on behalf of a river, if they think that that river's rights are being damaged, contravened. And this, it's a beautiful idea. It's you were reaching for the word. I call it moral imagination. And I think what Ecuador did in 2008 was an act of immense moral imagination from a as it were, a small country. And it was beautiful because there's a metaphysical claim at the heart of this, much earlier than there is a legal claim. And that is, at some level, rivers are alive, they are beings, and they have rights. They have always had rights. So rights is just the name that we happen to give to the capacity to that which a river needs, merits, deserves, has always possessed. And to our anthropocentric ears, and certainly to our anthropocentric legal system here, that comes as an affront. What? How can a river have rights? As you say, woo-woo, hippie.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, and you will know this, Jim, but of course corporations, which are non-human entities, have many rights within our legal system. Rights, in fact, which are partly guaranteed by the European Convention on Human Rights. A corporation has the right to privacy, the right to a fair trial. You and I could go and found a company tomorrow, and it would have more rights than a river that has flowed through this landscape for 10,000 years. There is something fundamentally wrong there.
That's a crazy stat. I love that term, moral imagination, and I love the idea that if we can ever get this into modern day culture, each river having its own HR department.
Hey, you're talking me out of it now.
No, okay, it wouldn't be called an HR department. We'd have
Guardians.
to change the vernacular. Guardians, which they already have. You are one of them.
Yes.
There are many.
So are you. There are many in this country.
I genuinely think you are onto something here when it comes to pushing for change. If I'm being cynical, it's because some of the great advice we've had on this podcast, and I've had in life in general, it was Yvonne Chouinard that told us last season on The Last Salmon that the only way to affect change, certainly in North America, where he's operating as an activist and conservationist, is through the legal system. It's the only threat that both industry and government alike really pay attention to. Now, if we were to give rights to rivers, that argument might stick here too. from a spiritual level, moral imagination level, I think
Yeah.
it would run deep into the soul of people, and they would get behind it. So I want to know how we can really get this going and building as a movement.
Well, let me just walk us a step back, or paddle us upstream a mile to where the spring of all this rises. And the title of this book I wrote is called "Is a River Alive?" Not "Should a River Have Rights?" And I think actually the rights question is a really exciting and interesting one, and exactly for the reason you pinpoint, which is that it takes place within law. It has the power that attaches imagination to change. But I also think that we have to tell a new and very old story about rivers better and again. And that very old story is that rivers are life forces. They are not only resources. And indeed, in a more radical phrasing, that rivers are alive. And to be able to say that and mean it, we have to rethink what we mean by life. And I think you and I would both agree. I may be speaking for you here, Jim, but that our lives have flowed with the lives of rivers. Our lives have been continuous with the lives of rivers. And when we begin to imagine rivers as having lives, having deaths, and even having rights, and as their lives being inextricable from ours, suddenly they spring into a newness that we've always known, but the power refuses to recognize. We now have such power over rivers that we can pick up whole watersheds and move them, drop them elsewhere. India can cut off the entire Indus to Pakistan as a weapon of war. We've impounded so much water in the Three Gorges Dam in the Yangtze River Basin that we have measurably slowed the rotation of the earth. The idea of river as toy, as movable thing, is extraordinary and has brought extraordinary things, but it has also left river absolutely objectified.
You talk about, in the book from memory, you talk about river being a liquid asset, a service provider.
Yeah.
A resource, an industrial resource, if you like. And that's how we see it, right? That's how we see it. We need to retell the story of the river.
Yeah, well, it's certainly how large-scale investment banks like Macquarie see it.
Yes.
It's a liquid asset to be juiced.
Yeah.
And that is what we've seen happen. And now, as you've been absolutely at the forefront of this, but as we have come to understand and recognize, witness the harm, the death, and the dying that this has brought to our rivers, so commensurately, this extraordinary upwelling of love and passion and activism and guardianship has arisen in these islands, and it's absolutely thrilling. It shouldn't need to be this way, but that it is, that citizens are taking up the slack left by government, by regulators, is it's one of the most hopeful things I know.
I couldn't agree more. What I find really inspiring on this journey with the rivers that I'm on is how passionate and emotive the saving of them is a subject, and it's visceral, and people like you do it brilliantly for us. You articulate that passion, but it's seemingly so buried deep, and people don't understand their connection to the rivers yet. And it feels like it's in its infancy, this relationship that we're reestablishing with the rivers. And like you, I agree, it's so heartening to open the newspapers, to speak to friends, to look on social media, to see how much support there is for these living things. It really is quite incredible, and sometimes does reduce me to pretty much tears. And I'm sure it has you with everything you've seen in river form.
Absolutely, here and elsewhere. I mean, we talked about this kind of lost love language for rivers. I have no problem saying that rivers are my friends, they're my neighbors, they're my fellow citizens. I go to rivers. There's a Czesław Miłosz quote, beautiful quote. It says, sometimes when we hurt, we returned to the banks of certain rivers. And I lost a I lost a really dear friend really fast a fortnight ago, like overnight fast.
Oh, I'm sorry
And
about that.
yeah, he was a hill person and a river person. And my first instinct was just to go up to the springs near my house and just sit and be with the water there, healing water that's drawn people to it for centuries as a healing presence, and just think of him with the water. And I think, yeah, as you said, I think it in a way it's so simple.
Mm.
of, of course, rivers are alive. Of course, they bring and give us life. Of course, they enliven us. Duh,
Yeah,
right?
it literally is dirt. And in order to perhaps just going back to you being an author, are we to change the language then? Is that what we need to do? Because language is super important. It's the way we communicate. Is that what we need to start doing when we talk about rivers? Do we need to start using words like rivers are being killed or murdered as opposed to they're dead or they're polluted if we're to capture imagination like we hope to?
Yeah, I think that language comes quite naturally already. You see it everywhere. You know what George Monbiot on the Wye, a great river is dying before our eyes, and then actually he does revise it and says no, it's been killed before our eyes. So I think this sort of animist language actually runs very very close to the surface, and we need to change grammar. We need to change the story of that we tell about rivers. So grammar, I now only speak of rivers who flow.
Who flow?
Yeah,
Are they masculine or feminine?
that is a really good question. I still it them, but if I don't say the river that flows, I say the river who flows. And
Okay.
I think if they did have a pronoun, it would be they. You
Yeah, I
know,
think so. That feels right. I can't explain why, but that certainly feels right. And we're, pronouns are being loosely reassembled and reassigned as of late, and I think that absolutely works. I mean, I'm just going back to your book, your journey down forgive me if I have this wrong, the Muteshikau
you got
Shipu.
it.
There you
Muteshika
go.
Shipu, yeah.
In Canada, where you actually journeyed down that river in a kayak with some friends, and that felt like that was a really powerful experience for you and a healing experience and kind of almost, it was a metaphysical experience like you spoke of earlier.
Oh, hugely, yeah. It was one of the most. I mean, I've done a lot of mountains in my time, and big mountains, high altitude, long expeditions. None of them has been, I think, as physically hard and certainly not as metaphysically turbulent as this one. It was just shy of 2 weeks, but we dropped by float plane about 120 miles up this system.
Wow.
And then we just had to kayak out over about 12 days and we fished. We didn't take any sort of main source of protein. We just had a rod. And the river, the name of the river translates as in Innu, this is the Innu name, Muteshikau. It translates as the river who flows between square blocky cliffs. And that's pretty much it. So it's like in places it's a gorge river. You have to portage down round huge falls. But it was also renowned in the 19th century for its trout, for the profusion of its trout. And we'd end 10 hours of getting just beaten up and buried by this beautiful wild river, and then we'd make camp. We'd set a little fire going, and at dusk we'd just flick a fly in the downstream of the nearest rapid, and we'd have 6 trout for dinner. Within minutes. It was, and there's no road between where the float plane dropped us and the sea. It's just osprey, deep northwards, pummeling white water. It wore me away in what turned out to be a kind of beautiful and exposing and powerful fashion.
And you met a local poet there, didn't you?
Oh yeah, Rita. Yeah,
Rita, who said, if I can quote, she almost, warning is too strong a word, but she gave you a foreshadow, didn't she? And she said, in the north on the river, you will be reborn.
Yeah.
There is something in the north which is not present where you are from. There are few other humans. You will be transformed. Powerful.
Yeah,
she was right.
So powerful. She was so right. Oh my goodness. Look, I still wear, this is the red band that she tied around my wrist. And she said, this is two and a half years ago now, I think. And she said, only the river or time can take that off. and they're the same thing. so,
Oh my.
so
She
that's
sounds
still.
incredible.
Oh my goodness, Jim. She's a Innu community leader. She's a language guardian. This is a small nation, small community, shrinking a language. I think about 22,000 speakers now. It's beautiful language. She sings it. She's an astonishing poet in French and Innu. But yeah, she gave me a series of very serious. I went to see her to say, "Can I descend the river?" I wanted her permission. It was absolutely crucial before, some white dude rocks up and drops in by float plane.
I'm writing a book. Can I use your
Exactly.
river?
Exactly. Completely unacceptable. So, but she was fantastically encouraging and enabling. And we're still very good friends now. We message all the time, and I'm translating her poetry into English for the first time. But yeah, so we had to pitch our tent facing east every day. We had to gather water for her from a certain point on the river, Labrador tea from another point on the river. We had to give a pinch of tobacco to the river and to the land each morning. And we had to keep our eyes out for a sacred tree. She was like, "You'll meet a sacred tree on the river. It'll declare itself to you. You'll know it when you see it." And the last thing she said is, "You have one question that you can ask the river, and it has to be the right question. And if you ask the river the right question, the river will give you the truest answer." And this all sounds mystical. I mean, Rita is like really business-like. She looked at me and she's like, "You live too much in your head. You look too much with your eyes. You don't feel enough with your heart, and you must not take your notebooks on the river." And I was like, "I can do all of that, but not the notebooks. I have to have my notebooks." What question would you ask a river, Jim? That's a tricky one.
What would I ask? I would ask the river, how can we help? That's what I'd ask. I know what the river gives me and what the river has given me, and I know that is the reason that propels me to give back, if you like, because it saved me. It literally saved me from I made no secret about it. When I lost my first daughter, it was the river, it was fly fishing. That was the thing that saved me. People have therapy, people talk to friends. It was standing in a river, casting a line and getting to know that environment, that cathedral of nature, if you like. That was my religion that saved me. And so I would want to know what we need to do to keep those rivers alive. The way you are asking us to look at rivers and reframe our perception of them, I genuinely think could force the door a little bit more in the corridors of Whitehall. What I'm saying is the counterpoint to your brilliant ideology is that it's only, if it is going to do more than just spark imagination and potentially affect change through democracy or otherwise, the counterpoint is it is completely reliant on those who are in power.
Yeah.
And it's not futile to explore it and to get people to get on board. It never is. But what can we do, or what do you think can be done in order to grab the attention of those that can make a difference?
Well, I think a lot of it is happening already. So you and I were both on the March for Clean Water in November, biggest water protest in the nation's history. Pathetic amount, really, relatively, of media coverage for it, given the literally wall-to-wall, week-long coverage that the farmers' inheritance tax protest got when they came and blocked Whitehall with tractors. Yep. I'm very sympathetic to farmers who have been forced into some very, very difficult positions by the drive to produce cheap food at scale since the Second World War. But it certainly said something about the priorities that the March for Clean Water got so relatively little coverage. But what we saw there was amazing, Jim, wasn't it? There were like the guilds were there. There were the paddleboarders over there, the surfers over there, and the anglers over there, and the fishers over there, and the wild swimmers over there, and everyone, and yet there was such a sort of shared passion. And the sign I saw more than any other, apart from a picture of Keir Starmer with sort of turds for eyebrows,
which is a great photo, a great graphic,
great graphic, was "Water is life." Water is life, and that really is at the heart of everything we've been saying. You've been talking, and I've spoken in a much more less severe way about how rivers heal us. They just heal us, and we have to heal them in return. Our fate flows with theirs, and it always has. I do not understand why government cannot see that at some level a culture is no better than its rivers, that they become this marker of a kind of imaginative, psychological, and legal health of an entire nation. If you let the rivers die, then the values are all wrong. This is a tiny idea, and it's not mine, but in France, if you cross any river, I think this is right, large or small, its name is on the road, right? Here and there, the bigger rivers, the bigger roads, you might see a riverboard. But I think we should have the names of every single river signposted every time a road crosses them. We should also have a storyteller for every river. We need to find ways that each river gets its complex story told. Water has been generalized, deterritorialized. It's become the transparent stuff that takes our waste away and fills our glasses. But these rivers, they run deep in this landscape. They have shaped city. They have shaped town. They've shaped waves of invasion, migration, movement. They are the arteries and veins, and we have forgotten this. We bury our rivers, as you know, in cities. Yeah. And what I'd also like to see is a huge blue river painted across every city, following the route of where a river is buried. So when we walk London and we cross the buried Quaggy or the buried Fleet, I want us to step across water on pavement.
That's such a lovely idea. That's such a lovely idea, and such a subtle and artistic and acceptable, for want of a better word, way of showing people without getting in their way that there are rivers everywhere and how important they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we could lobby for. I'd get behind that. I think it's a great idea. Just going back to the politics of it all, if I may, because I think it's important. I think if we can politicize your idea, I think it really would have legs. I was at a river forum yesterday, and it was hosted in parts by Michael Gove, Lord Gove, who, unless people need reminding, used to be the Environment Secretary not so long ago, one of the many that passed through the revolving doors of the Tories. He was an incredible speaker, inspirational, as you might expect him to be. And we asked him, and all the sort of great minds of river conservation were in this room, and we said to him, what can we do to get through to government, to get them to do what is necessary for our rivers? And he gave a very candid but very useful answer, I think. And I think it can apply to your words. He said, politicians, I used to be one, and I will hold my hand up, they don't care a damn. As much as you tell them that they should be, they will not care a damn about the cultural value of a river, or the value to anglers, or the value to wild swimmers, or the value to canoeists. Yes, it might have a bearing when it comes to election and campaigns and votes, but actually once they're in, they don't care about that stuff. What they care about is easy wins and making them look good. It's they're shamelessly vain and narcissistic and ambitious. In the main. I know it was
takes
horribly,
one to know one.
Yeah. It takes one to know one, but nobody lifted an eyebrow, so you won't be surprised to hear. But what he said and how we can play to that is you need to take your case to the politicians and show them what an easy win it is for them to turn this problem around. They can do it quickly. They can do it inside their short-term 5-year turnaround. And I think with a fresh idea like giving a river a voice, is a river alive? Rivers run through people as much as they do places. Something like that, saying, we will help you. We have the plan. We have the implementation and the strategy that you need to make you look good. Seems to me quite a breakthrough. And I think your idea would fit neatly into that.
Well, thanks, Jim. And I don't praise Tories often or lightly. And I will say that I thought Michael Gove was a terrible education secretary for various reasons, including the sort of atrophying slow death of English literature that his reforms have bequeathed. But I think he was the best environment secretary of the last 15 years. He was in post a lot longer than many, and I believe he believed. I believe he really cared in a way that Starmer doesn't. I think Steve Reed does, but his hands are shackled by the growth imperative. Yeah. So it's really interesting to hear Gove on that, and I believe him. I mean, the English government has openly set its face against the granting of rights to natural entities. It has said we're not doing that. I think there's possibilities within the devolved governments. Scotland has often been more imaginative, more radical, and more daring in terms of big step reforms of this kind. So I would be interested to see, let's say, Scotland or the Welsh government, which has done some incredible devolved legislation making, including the Future Generations Act, which is literally the only jurisdiction in the entire world which behoves its lawmakers, its policymakers, to consider the welfare of future generations. A kind of deep time, are we being good ancestors question has to be asked of every significant decision taken in the Senate. So I'd love to see Welsh government or Scottish government step up and say, we are going to grant rights to maybe just one river in the first instance, thin end of the wedge. We're going to grant rights to the Dee. We're going to grant rights to the Arn.
The Wye would be great.
So the Wye, the problem is it goes into England.
Yeah.
Rivers don't respect national boundaries. They're wanderers. But the Wye would be great, and actually would be a very provocative one. But as you mentioned, the Sussex Ouse has, and here's the really tiny chink of light in all this, has had its Charter of Rights championed by the Lewis District Council.
It's fantastic, though.
It's fantastic.
Does that protect it in any way?
No, but it's really a performative or symbolic stage at the moment. But what it does do, one of the things it does do is charge a group of guardians to be the voice of the river, to speak as best they are able for the river at the table where decisions get made. And there are really interesting innovations starting to happen within companies, within organizations, within governmental or quasi-governmental bodies, basically giving nature a voice and tasking individuals or groups with really doing their absolute empathetic and scientific best to think not what is best for humans, but what is best for the river, let's say. And very often what is best for the river is best for humans as well. So it's not an oppositional structure. It really isn't.
It's completely in partnership. And on this show, obviously, we believe that the salmon, speaking of wanderers, we believe the salmon is the poster boy for the rivers. And if you get it right for the salmon, you're getting it right for the rivers. And with that in mind, in your book, you talk a little bit, Salar does get some spotlight, which is great.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about the salmon on the Klamath there in Oregon.
Well, I say at some point in the book, hope is the thing with rivers, which is a little
lovely
play on this famous Emily Dickinson line. She says, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul. But hope
Beautiful.
is the thing with rivers. And one of the reasons that rivers are hopeful and hopeful things is as we know that they can heal themselves with astonishing speed. So the Klamath flows out of Oregon, crosses into California, and then debouches into the Pacific. It's a big system, about 250 miles, I think, up to the headwaters from the coast. And a century ago, it was dammed, massively dammed. Huge dams went up, including this sort of Tolkienly named one, the Iron Gate Dam. And I think it was about 20 years ago, the Yurok tribe, whose lands, tribal lands had been drowned by those dams, began a campaign for de-damming. And it took alliance making. It was not easy. It was driven on and on and on tirelessly by often intergenerational activism on the part of the Yurok people. And then the dams came down. It's the biggest de-damming project in the world. And it was completed in August last year. The Iron Gate Dam came down at the very end of August, I think it was. And I remember this because my heart was really hurting for various reasons last autumn. And I suddenly read this story flashed up. River scientists had fitted a sonar where the Iron Gate Dam had stood. And 2 weeks after the dam came down, they caught the blurry outline of the first Chinook salmon.
2 weeks.
Migrating up. 2 weeks. That instinct, that brain. This had been the third largest salmon run on the Pacific coast at its height. When the dams went in, it was stopped. And Adrimus fish obviously there's no getting past the Iron Gate. So, and yet they know, if you unbuild it, they will come.
If you unfuck it, they will come. It's insane, isn't it?
It's insane.
And these fish, whether it be a king salmon like the Chinook king, whatever like that, or the Atlantics, or any of these fish, again, this is why I am just, in awe of this species. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Somehow, those fish, they would have been, I don't know, a relic of a strain, maybe swimming past, maybe hanging around in the estuaries, and I'm just going to go and have a look. I smell something here that I haven't smelt in a while.
Yes.
I'm going to go and have a look.
Yeah. And you think probably for a century, Chinook have been knocking on the door. They'll have tried. They'll have met the unbroachable door of the Iron Gate Dam, and they'll have turned back. But they've probably knocked on the door every season, and then suddenly one of them, hey, the door's open.
Hey guys, the party's back on.
Yes,
let's go. I know,
let's go.
It's mind blowing, and of course heartbreaking at the same time to know what happened to all those probably thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of fish that had tried and failed and been, dolphin, seal, orca fodder or whatever, for a century or more. And I guess bringing us back to these home shores, I live on a chalk stream. I'm desperately always trying to champion the chalk stream salmon as a rare substrain of the Atlantic. I've got my own little projects going on down here to try and bring back the chalk stream salmon. You too live on a chalk stream up in Cambridge.
Yeah, that's the spring, this little spring that rises near me. That's where a river's born. I was up there just now. I'm up there every day. It's the one I went to when my friend died. And that feeds the Cam. My watershed goes Nine Wells Wood, Hobson's Brook, Vickers Brook, the River Cam, the River Great Ouse, the North Sea. And so I'm lucky to live. Yeah, I'm lucky to live where a river is born. It probably started flowing about 12,000 years ago. And we know that Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, very recent archaeological evidence shows that hunter-gatherers were drawn to the spring between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago. They paused there, they made tools, they cooked, left charred hearthstones. The Neoliths came, the Bronze Age came, huge Iron Age, hill fort there, the Romans, and now the city itself. Those springs, and here's another version of thinking about rivers as alive. Those springs have been historical actors. They're not just some sort of passive resource in the landscape. They have organized human life around themselves for the best part of 8,000 years. And when we think of the way water does that, flowing fresh water does that, suddenly it leaps into agency and vividness within the deeper human time. And it's completely thrilling. So yeah, I would also love to see chalks. I mean, the salmon are not going to get to my spring, don't get me wrong. So one of the things I do when people visit me is I walk them from the center of the city, and we walk against the flow. It's about 2.5 miles, and I walk them back up to the spring site. So I say, we're gonna, and what happens when you walk against the flow, in this case, is that time reverses as well. And you start in the city where the water is kind of, there's all sorts of filamental algae over it. It's sick. By the time it gets into the city, it's sick, even though it brought health to the city. Because in the early 17th century, the city fathers ducted the water from these springs right into the heart of Cambridge, precisely because there were so many waves of disease, waterborne disease from dirty water. So they organized the water, and it flowed down through the city streets, and then they put a fountain in the center of the city, and fresh, clean, healthy water flowed from that fountain for nearly 2 centuries, over 2 centuries, and kept the citizens healthy. But now the city threatens the life of the springs. When you walk against the flow, you see the chalk stream itself go back in time. It recovers. It becomes the closer you get to the source, the healthier the water. And I was walking there just last week, and I suddenly saw a water vole on the upper reaches for the first time. I just jumped out of my skin. I just howled and punched the air. And then the next day I did it again, and I saw a grass snake swimming, and again just thrilled, absolutely thrilled by these good indicators.
Good omens.
Good omens, good indicators, absolutely. It was thrilling. But the kicker, and it's a brutal kicker, is that these springs are so fragile because of the levels of abstraction and increasingly drought, that they have literally been fitted with a life support system. So an augmentation pump was fitted behind the springs in 2019 because the water company knew that if those springs run dry, it will be a calamitous story for them. And so when abstraction levels and water table combine to the extent that they threaten the flow of the springs, the augmentation pump kicks in, takes water from further down the system, pumps it into the groundwater immediately proximate to the springs. And all this is happening 500 yards from Addenbrooke's hospital. So there you have patients on ventilators, and in the little wood you have a spring on a life support system.
Hope for the future? Will rivers be kept alive?
Yes, they will. We're going to change this. We are changing it, all of us. River Action, you, the Friends of the Y, these incredible groups, the citizen scientists who are training each other, the Riverfly initiative, which I'm getting my Riverfly training this summer finally, so I can do some basic, data collection and surveying. It is the guardianship movement in this country is such a thing to watch and be in my case, a peripheral part of, your case, a very central part of, and it all springs from love.
It does. It does. That's a wonderful way to round that question off. And indeed, I learned yesterday that the UK has the highest number of activists. That term to me is just, as you said, somebody who has passion and love, and perhaps knows how to articulate it than any other country in Europe when it comes
around water and rivers,
around nature.
Wow. Well, I think that's partly a function of us being literally the 186th most nature depleted country in the world, as it were.
Maybe we have to get to that point. We have to hit rock bottom before we start to care. But that was ever thus with humanity. Before we go into our final three questions, something's just come up for me, and that is, you talk about your rivers. You're so articulate. You're poetic. You're lyrical, evocative. As many words as I can think of that sort of take your words out of the dry nature of certain types of language and put it into imagination and heart. Ted, obviously.
Yeah,
metaphysical poet, nature poet, wrote about rivers beautifully, wrote about salmon beautifully. Has he had any bearing on your work?
Oh, huge. I mean, I used to say the three H's had made me as a writer. So that's Heaney, Hughes, and Hopkins. Yes, and I mean, when I write prose, what we weirdly call non-fiction prose, I think all the time about rhythm, sound, assonance, alliteration, beats, patterns, all the stuff basically that poets think about. I think any prose writer should be thinking about that. And nonfiction to me is a form of extended poetry. And I grew up listening to Hughes read his poems aloud speaking aloud was so vital to Hughes. He was such a advocate for learning poems by heart, speaking them aloud. And of course, he was an angler and an activist angler as well. And he understood, as you and Mark Wormold and Charles and many others know, and he was the one who saw the dying rivers of Devon in the early days and organized around it. So he's a massive inspiration. Same for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had I paint a little bit, and I had an exhibition last year which I call Creatures of Light.
It was beautiful.
Which is a phrase from his poem That Morning.
Yeah,
that's what he called salmon, and absolutely. And when I learnt, I was going to invite you. Actually, at some point, you must come as my guest and come and fish at the Upper Itchen next door to me, where Ted Hughes used to fish reasonably regularly with his friend Roger Harrison. And Roger has letters of Ted's. Ted used to thank his invitation to fish Roger's river by writing him beautiful letters of thanks and describing his beats in detail. And Roger, who's now 94 and going strong, shows me these letters whenever I go around, and they are things to behold.
Wow.
Real like fishing letters from Ted.
Ted Hughes. I just very briefly, I went fly fishing for pike with Ted Hughes's rod.
Did you catch?
Up in the fens, yeah, we did. And that was. I mean, we all know Hughes's poem Pike anyway, but I did feel like I was fishing in his poems and hauling out these green gold tigers of the river with his rod. It was brilliant. Big green sort of nasty lure things and slash dragging them along the surface, and we hit the pike pot. I think 10 caught that day. It was kind of wild. All went back, obviously.
He loved his pike. His pike. Final 3 questions, Rob. Normally we talk about salmon. I'm gonna replace salmon with rivers, but I think the answer might be the same. If you had £1 billion, dollars, an inordinate amount of money, and you had to spend it on saving the rivers and by extension the wild salmon, how would you spend it?
Well, I'd take pounds over dollars for a start. Let's
get
it's
that
worth
right,
more.
Jim.
Yeah,
that's where we are right now in the economy. Let's take the pound.
Okay, I think my answer is big river, little river. So I want to show what can be done. So I want to take the why, and I want to bring the why back to health. That's the big river. I want that river brought back to health so that salmon are spawning in number in its headwaters again. And then Little River, the Stiffkey in Norfolk. We're back to chalk stream salmon here. Charles Rangeley Wilson, who we've already mentioned,
he loves that river.
Loves the river, and he's re-wiggled. He and the Norfolk Rivers Trust have re-wiggled a kilometre or so stretch of that, which I've visited, and it is part of the geography of hope. You step into that place and you see what can be done when a river is reconnected with its floodplain. It's not a very long river, I think it's about 25 kilometres. You could re-meander, re-wiggle, re-free the entirety of that river, and the salmon will pour back into it. So North Sea, East Anglian salmon river back. So that's my billion. The Wye and the Stiffkey.
The Wye. Can I just ask, what would you do with the Wye? Because that's the real question.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You just buy it first and have a think.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we declare its rights, obviously, yes. Jim. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's free. That's free. And then we go to work on the IPUs, and then we go to work on incentivizing better slurry management on the part of we incentivize through ALMS and other environmental farm payment systems, better riparian borders. We know what to do. We know what to do.
We do. I love it. The big river, little river. It's great. The brother and the sister.
Yeah. And then they become the rivers of hope. Yeah. They show what it could be like. And when you step into the Wye and you step into the Stiffkey, you step back in time and you step forwards in time.
You do. You step back into Narnia on the Wye, don't you? C.S. Lewis's Golden Valley. Wouldn't that be amazing if that river became like how he remembered and wrote about it? If you had no money. What would you do? I think we know the answer to that because you're doing it so well. But tell me.
I'd write.
You'd write.
Yeah. You just need a pen and some ink and maybe a laptop, which I've got, and I'm very fortunate to have those. I'd write.
Yeah. Great. Go keep on writing. Please keep on writing. And even if it's not about rivers next time, come back to rivers, come back to salmon, come back to this world that you know and love so well, because it really is thought-provoking, imaginative stuff, and it will,
Thanks,
I'm hoping, light the touch paper. Before we sign off, it's your last day on Earth, God forbid, and you're suspended fishing, which, isn't too much of a stretch being an angler. Where would it be and who would it be with?
I'd be with my dad, John, and my brother, Jim, and we'd be up on a PT hill loch somewhere, probably in the northwest, Torridon, maybe, and we'd have had a good big day on the hill, and we'd have had a swim in a horseback brown pool on the way down, and then we'd cast a wet fly, probably Silver Doctor, works pretty nicely up there, and we'd catch a few little trout, and we'd grill them over a heather fire, and we'd eat and we'd sleep.
It's so simple yet so beautiful. One of my favourite lines in the book is "Hope is the thing with rivers." And I thought perhaps we could end our conversation with the moving and poetic lines you write as you stand at the gorge's end there on that river that I find it challenging to pronounce in Canada.
The Mateshikaushippu. Yeah, do you want to read them, Jim? Because I'd love to hear you read them.
You want me to read them? I'd be honoured to read them, and I'll try and do them the justice that you give them. Find the current, follow the flow, and the river's voices say and sing what I cannot comprehend. And each time I lean my mind out to listen, they retreat in the measure I approach them. So instead I start to scrawl the pages you are reading here, and the paper glistens with river mist, until I'm just jotting words in ink that's blotting in curls as phrases whirl into the notebook from a source vastly greater than the sphere of my skull, and I find tears in my eyes that I did not put there, but the river did. May involve a great reach outward of mind and imagination, and for those few seconds, beckoned on and shivered by that hourglass shape and silvered force that is a mouth and has a tongue and utters after miles and minutes and years on the flow, and in it, I am rivered.
Whoa, that was amazing. God, thank you for doing that. That was flipping brilliant.
I'm just reading the words on the page, and I am, the audience I hope will understand. These words are, yes, it is prose, but it's so poetic, and it's so moving, and it's so evocative that you get lost in the language, and it's so pertinent to the world of river. And those final three words, I am rivered, is something I wish I'd come up with. It's beautiful, Rob. It's beautiful.
I'll just close by saying I didn't come up with them. The river wrote that. It really did.
Robert, thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest. It has been an inspiration. I urge people to read this book, whether you are a river person or not, or you'll be reminded that we all are by the time you have finished this book, and you will finish it because you can't put it down. It's fantastic. Robert, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jim.
My thanks to Rob Macfarlane for joining me, and his book, Is a River Alive, is out now. On the next episode of The Last Salmon, Richard Davis on why the Outer Hebrides could be the last stronghold for Atlantic salmon in the UK.
It's my life. I moved country because of it. Cowardly, in a way, because I could see I couldn't have an impact in Wales. You come to the Hebrides and then fell in love with it and thought, right, we've got something we can save here.
And why he believes talking with, not fighting against, salmon farms has helped their situation.
Aiming for a fantastical, idealised future where we don't have agriculture, we don't have dams, we don't have fish farms, it's not realistic. Our remit is to protect wild fish, not to attack other industries.
Listen and follow The Last Salmon on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to keep in the fight for our salmon. The Last Salmon Season 2 is supported by the Missing Salmon Alliance.